Hi guys, this is the last presentation in Module 2, and we're going to be talking about context and environment. You can find this information on page S28 on Table 5. After you complete this presentation and complete both of the discussion threads in this module and upload your occupational collage or your digital occupational collage, you can then take exam 2 or module 2 examination. Now, I want to just share again how available I am to you. I know at the beginning of the semester I had mentioned that, but I want you to know I'm used to really communicating with my students throughout the entire semester. As we're not in class and we are not face-to-face, I want to make sure that you have a good understanding of the information that is covered prior to taking the examination. In looking at some of the grades from the exam 1, I would say that some of the scores were probably less than what you desired to receive. So I want to take the time we can to meet either in Google Hangout, you can Skype with me, you can FaceTime, you can text me, you can call me. I just ask that prior to calling me that you text me your phone number so that I know the number that's calling, or else I won't answer. And if it's a Google Hangout, we'll just have to set up a time that works. This will be the time that you can ask me specific questions about the content in the module, and I can give you clarification prior to you going in and taking the exam for each of the modules. So please take advantage of me. I really want to help you to be successful in this course, and I think that this is going to be a good way for us to work together. Okay, let's get started. This module, we're going to be talking about context and environment. When we talk about context, it's referring to the interrelated conditions that are within and surrounding a client. It looks at 4 different areas, which are cultural, temporal, personal, and virtual. We're going to talk about each of these a little bit more in detail. When we talk about culture, these are customs, beliefs, activity patterns, and behavioral standards that are accepted by a client and by the society that a client is involved in. Cultural context influences identity and the activity choices that the clients often choose to participate in. There's a few examples that we can talk about in terms of cultural context, but one of them that I like to use, and I've used this in every semester I've taught this class, is Keuka College. Keuka College certainly has a culture all to itself. It is a college. So colleges in themselves have different cultural experiences that people or students engage in, or even faculty engage in. As students, you have a certain set of expectations. You have activity patterns and behavioral standards that you strive to achieve, and you have certain beliefs that you engage in. The Keuka College hashtag is believe in what we can do together. And that's really part of our culture. As you leave Keuka College, whether you're taking one class or whether you are graduating with a bachelor's degree or a master's degree, you've been part of that Keuka College cultural context. And that's something that you can continue to carry with you. Another part of that is looking at field period. Field period is part of Keuka College's history and customs that they've had in place since almost the beginning of this college, or since the college was started. So those are 2 examples that I like to share. What I'd like for you to do is share a cultural context example with me at this time of something that is personal to you. The next is personal context. These are features of an individual that are not part of their health condition or health status. This looks at age, gender, socioeconomic status, educational status, group membership, and population membership. I'll give you a few examples of my personal context. I am married. I am a female. I am a mother. and I live in a middle-class suburban neighborhood. I have a doctoral degree. I teach at Cuco College, and I am a group member of AOTA and a volunteer member of NBCOT. These are all examples of personal context, of my personal context. So please share with me a personal context example for you. The next is looking at temporal context. Temporal is probably one of my favorite things. It looks at experiences of time as shaped by occupation. It includes, as mentioned here, stages in life, the time of year or time of day. It looks at duration and rhythm of an activity, but it also looks at the tempo, the speed, the synchronization, the sequence of activities, as well as history. When we think of history, you might not understand the temporal component, but think about maybe the birth of a child. That's a historical temporal event. You remember that like it's yesterday, even if it happened 28 years ago. Or a war, World War II. They just talked, it's 75 years since D-Day occurred, and that was just yesterday. That is history, but it looks at a time of day or time of year, something that has impacted this environment or this world. But temporal processing, or temporal context, I should say, also refers to sports. I enjoy sports very much. I enjoy watching sports more than I do engaging in sports. I'm not very coordinated. But when you look at sports, let's look at hockey. So the NHL playoffs are going on now. Not sure if you're watching that, but my husband and I are St. Louis fans, so we are rooting for the Blues. And so when you look at hockey, they have 3 periods. Those periods are all part of that temporal context, okay? Each period has 20 minutes. That's also part of that temporal context. When a goal is scored, it is recorded in a time that, in the actual time that the score occurred, part of that temporal context. When you look at baseball, baseball has 9 innings. Each inning has a top and a bottom half. Each one of those halves have 3 outs in that. All of that, again, is part of that temporal processing. The other one is NBA. The NBA playoffs are going on too. Not sure who you're rooting for, Golden State or Toronto. But when you're looking at the NBA, there's a shot clock. That individual who has control of the ball has to make a shot on the basket within a certain time frame. In NBA, they have quarters. Or I'm sorry, I believe that, yeah, they have quarters in a basketball game. College basketball game has halves. Again, that's temporal context. Another example of this is the time of year. Finally, in central New York, we have hit summertime, and I'm so excited as I'm sitting outside in the sun trying to bask in the glory a little bit. I know it's also lunchtime because my stomach is getting hungry. Those also are examples of temporal context. I'd like for you to share with me a temporal context example that is important to you. The last one that we're going to talk about is virtual context. When we talk about virtual context, this is an environment where communication occurs by the means of airways or computers or in the absence of physical contact. This online class is all about being virtual. We are not working in a one-to-one physical contact basis. However, we could, if you wanted to call me, or you wanted to text me, or you wanted to do a Google Hangout, that's also part of that virtual context. That would be more in a real life environment or a near time environment. Could also be a form of simulated environment. What I'd like for you to do now is think of a virtual context that you have actually engaged in this morning. The next areas that we're going to talk about are environments. So we have the physical environment and we have the social environment. The physical environment is broken down into 2 different areas. It looks at natural and it looks at built. Now your book talks about the natural environment is being a geographical terrain, plants, animals, and sensory qualities within the surroundings. In OT, however, we take that a step further. It also includes the environment in which occupational performance typically occurs that is most commonly seen or witnessed by the person engaging it. An example of this might be a patient in a rehab setting getting dressed. They would likely get dressed in the bathroom. That would be their natural environment. If you're working with a kindergarten student, here's another example, a kindergarten student, and they're working on handwriting. The most natural environment for them to be in would be in their classroom environment to work on handwriting skills. We're going to elaborate a little bit more on this in the next slide. When we talk about built environments, this includes furniture, tools, devices, and buildings. We can also use this in the area of contrived and non-contrived, and we're going to talk about that in a couple more minutes. The next area is social. This social environment is the presence of and relationships with and the expectations of the person, group, or populations for whom that client has contact with. This includes the availability and expectations of the significant individual and can include a spouse, a friend, a coworker, a caregiver. And the social environment can happen on an individual basis, in a group, or in a population. Why is that important? Well, because environment and context often affect occupations. Let's think about a couple of examples. Would you cook dinner in a living room environment at 8 a.m. before you had breakfast? Probably not. That doesn't make sense. So looking at the environment and the context, that doesn't jive. Something isn't right. You would likely cook breakfast in a kitchen environment in the morning, and in the late afternoon time, you would cook dinner, probably in the kitchen and not in the living room area. When you're getting dressed, would you put on your pants and shirt before you put on your undergarments? Of course not. Why is that important? What component of context does that signify? What I want you to do is think about, what is your day like? What happens during your day? Think about a sequence in time. What are the performance patterns that you engage in? And what would happen if it didn't go in order? How would that affect your areas of occupation or your occupational performance? Let's talk now about how context and environment can impact skills and body functions. We've already talked about skills and body functions in the previous presentation. You've given me an example of each of these. Now what I'd like for you to do is add to that current example and now include the context and environment that is associated with the skills and body functions that you identified. So I'm going to break this down. So again, the skills are gripping and lifting a coffee pot. The body function is the grip and bicep strength. The context and environment might be temporal, because we're looking at morning and at breakfast time. Most people, or at least a large number of people, tend to have coffee in the morning. There's other people that have it all day long, much like my daughter, but most people would have breakfast in the morning. Okay, the next skill was reaching for the faucet. The body function is shoulder range of motion. If we're going to look at the personal context, this could be a college student, and it could be in her dorm room, his or her dorm room. Okay, so now you're looking at the personal content or context, but you're doing it in a natural environment. Okay, in the college dorm bathroom. Okay, the next skill area is noticing water rising in the pot and responding by turning it off. Body function is a global mental function, and that's problem solving. This could be done in the physical environment of the kitchen. Okay, I'm hoping that some of this is making sense to you. And what I'm going to do is have you take a minute, share with me again the skills and body functions that you had previously identified, but now add to that the context and environment that those occupations might be occurring in. Okay. How we approach this as occupational therapy practitioners is that we are experts in analyzing the complex and reciprocal relationships between our clients and within the environment and the activities that they're engaging in. When we talk about reciprocity, this is a back and forth joint relationship. It's not unilateral, but it's happening in the confines of working with another person or an object. We make recommendations depending on the client's needs to alter or edit or modify the structure, modify the activity, or adapt the environment or the context that the activity is happening in. When looking more at context and environment, we can't always see our clients in the best environment or at the best time of day. So think about in a rehab setting. If you're working with an individual on dressing skills and you have 10 people on your caseload that need to work on dressing skills, it is impossible to see all of them in the morning. So what you might have to do is you might have to create an environment so that it mimics their natural environment. We might have to contrive an environment to mimic an environment that they might be that they might need when they are discharged from the rehab center. So let's think an example of this would be an individual in rehab again, and they've had a total knee replacement, or I'm sorry, total hip replacement. With that, they have what are called hip precautions, and those precautions have to be followed for up to 12 weeks. And those precautions are they can't bend at 90 degrees at the hip, they can't internally rotate their leg, and they can't bend down to touch their toes. Okay, so what we have to do is we have to adapt their environment in their home setting so that they can go home and safely get in and out of the bathtub, sit on the toilet, get around their house with a walker. We don't necessarily know what their bathroom setup is like, but we can ask them and we can contrive and set up an environment that simulates what their bathroom might look like so that they can engage in those activities. You can assess their level of independence and know that they're going to be safe when they're discharged home. We're always looking at what best supports our clients. What are the demands that are present that we need to attend to? What is it that's going to possibly be a barrier for that client's occupational performance? Is there enough support? Is our client going to get the support needed at home? And if so, by who or by what kind of equipment? And we want to make sure that they have that readily available. Is there thorough and timely feedback? By seeing a patient engage in an occupational activity, we can give feedback to make sure that they're safe, that they're not going to hurt themselves, that they're not going to develop habits that are contraindicating what it is they want to achieve. And again, we want to customize to the person. So what contexts and environments have the largest impact on you? That's going to be the final question for this module. Thanks, guys, and please be sure to reach out to me if you have any questions or if you want to have a mini review session or something of that sort prior to taking the examination. Thanks, guys.